Hello, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Africa Center for Project Knowledge and Techniques. My name is Milka. We're just giving guys a few minutes to log in. In the meantime, you could be indicating in the chat box where you are logging in from, and we'll be glad to know. Welcome very much to today's webinar. So welcome once again. At this point, I would like to welcome Pauline, who is our academics coordinator, and she's going to tell us more about Africa Center. So welcome, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Milka. And thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those who've joined us. We really appreciate you being with us here, ready to learn from what we have to offer. So I will share with you briefly what we do at African Center. Sorry, Milka, you need to help me share. my screen.
Okay, Pauline.
So for those who've been joined us from the beginning, we've seen that we are a center that is focused on training, consultancy, especially in the development world, to build people's capacity, to help them be able to achieve more in their work, to grow professionally as individuals, and also to grow professionally in their organizations. Kindly let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can, Pauline.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Milka mentioned, my name is Pauline Mondia, and I coordinate the training activities of Africa Center for Project Management and Knowledge. So basically, I'm just going to tell you briefly who we are and what we do. We're going to look at what is our mission and core values, what is our training methodology, our core training courses, the kind of certification that we offer, and at the end, we'll share the contact so that you can get in touch with us for more information. So we are a training and knowledge center offering development, humanitarian, and corporate training globally. Mostly we do this in Kenya and Africa, but as you can see today, we have participants from all over the world. So we're hoping to move on to other areas. We provide top-of-the-class capacity building and training, and this translates to having high-performing, successful professionals and organizations who are able to achieve their goals and objectives, as well as have a positive impact in our world. So our vision is to build individuals and organizations for excellence in the society. We know that we need to first build ourselves as individuals before we can build the organization. So our trainings are geared, first of all, to growing an individual and then growing the organization. And our mission is to build individuals and organizations for excellence in society through dynamic and effective capacity building programs. We ensure that individuals and organizations achieve a high level of performance and success in all their professional endeavors. So what are our core values? Our first core value is innovation. We believe it's very important to be innovative, to always look out for new ideas and new ways of doing things. Then synergy. No man can work alone. So we work a lot together with different people, with different groups of people, that we can be able to share the kind of information we have and ensure that we give holistic information to all the clients and to all those who join our trainings. Then integrity. This is very important for us and should be important for all of us participants here, so that we do and we say what we mean and we mean what we say. Then, of course, flexibility is also important in our training programs. They are not cast in stone, and we are able to tailor them to different individuals, to different organizations, so that they can get as much as possible. And our slogan is that training works. We believe that once we are able to train individuals or our clients, they are able to perform better in their work, and this gives them satisfaction, as well as makes them more productive for their organization. So what are the training methodologies that we use? First of all, we have the pre-training evaluation. This is important to help us understand the training needs of the participant so that we can give them what they need. We don't just have blanket training where people are just trained for the sake of training. We always want to make sure that our trainers get what exactly they need. So we carry out a pre-training evaluation to understand where the gaps are so that we can be able to tailor our training so as to cater for those needs. Then we have practical and participatory. This is suited for adult learners because most of our clients are adult learners, professionals who are already working in their fields. So we carry trainings that are very participatory. It's not a lecture kind of training, but whereby everybody participates, everybody has an input. Then we use a lot of videos in our trainings because we know for adult learners, seeing is an easier way for them to be able to remember what they need to remember. So we incorporate a lot of video in our trainings. Then we also make handouts and manuals because we know most of our clients are very busy people. They're already juggling work and family and maybe business and so many other things. And we don't expect them to remember everything that is trained or given during the training session. So we provide handouts and manuals that they can use for future reference when they want to remember or refer to something that they had already learned before. Then we also do a lot of demonstrations when we are doing our trainings. We give practical exercises as we train on different tools, on different aspects, different techniques, just to ensure that the trainee has been able to grasp all the different things that have been given during the training. Then, of course, after that, we do a post-training evaluation. This is to follow up on our clients to see whether how they have been able to implement what they have learned from the training. So for us, success does not mean just that we tick a box when we finish the training, but for us, success means that the trainees have been able to put into practice what they have learned, and they've been able to move from point A to point B, have been able to perform better in their jobs, they've been able to increase maybe their products and their services, to increase income, whatever was their goal, that they've been able to achieve that. That is very important for us, and that's when we say that our trainings have been successful. What are the different types of training options that we have? We have, of course, a classroom instruction, whereby this can be done in an organization where they are. It can also be done in maybe in an institution or in a hotel, depending on the venue that is convenient for the client. But even if it's classroom, we said there are a lot of practical things that go on within this. Then we are also open to doing online instruction. Like now we have seen we have participants from all over the world. I've seen we have participants from Nepal, from Nigeria. We also do online instruction, whereby we can connect with our people who are out there and carry out online trainings. We also do hybrid, whereby we have both classroom and online. This is mainly, for example, where we are based here in Kenya. Maybe people are not available all the time, so we can have several online trainings, and then we can have classroom instruction, whereby the participants can now meet and even have group discussions, and we can also meet and do question and answer. So these are some of our core trainings, which I will not, I think, go through and read them because of them. But basically, we focus mostly on project management, different areas of project management, the planning, the implementation, monitoring and evaluation, leadership, and so on, finance, grant writing, proposal writing, all this. We also have some focus on communication, because we know communication is very important when we are carrying out our projects. We also look at environment, because this is very important. One of our key trainings that we are doing is climate resiliency and food security, because people don't have food. If we don't look at what our climate is, then the different projects that we are doing, whether they're in agriculture, whether they're in finance, whether they're in health, they will be affected. Data collection and management is also very important, because as we always say, numbers don't lie. So the numbers are very important in any project, in any activities that we do, to help us be able to learn what we are doing, where we are coming from, and where we are going. And we've added another important area, which is health and wellness, because we know that health is wealth. Unless we are healthy, we will not be able to implement the projects that we are implementing. Unless we are healthy, we will not be able to go about doing our daily activities. So this is also something very important and new that we have come up with, that we want to support organizations in health and wellness programs to ensure that their employees are healthy and can be able to be as productive as possible. So what kind of training certifications do we have? We have basic certification level, where we have courses that go for 1 month at a cost of $150. We also have advanced certificate level courses, which take about 3 months. And also diploma certificate level, this usually go for a duration of 6 months at a cost of $900. But we also have short courses that can be tailor-made to different organizations, or can be taken as per our training modules that range from 3 days to 2 weeks. And for this, the costs usually depend on the duration and on the course. and we can give this information, further information to you if you're on request. So thank you very much. That is a brief of who we are, and this is how you can contact us. Those telephone numbers, either via email or that post office box for those who still use a post office box. So without further ado, I think we go into the main course, or what is our main issue here, which is our presentation from Stephen on demystifying M&E frameworks. So Stephen is very knowledgeable, very vast with the M&E and project management, and I hope our ears and our eyes are open to listen to what he has for us. So karibu sana, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Pauline, for taking us through what Africa Center for Project Knowledge and Techniques does. And I'm also delighted to join you and basically just do this session that we are looking forward to have a very good discussion regarding demystifying the M&E frameworks in results-based monitoring and evaluation. And I'm looking forward to be able to probably do this in 1 hour time. And again, we will be able to have some session just for some feedback session. Just as soon as I'm done, just running through the presentation that we have for today as we look at understanding this particular topic that gives a lot of people headache in terms of understanding what frameworks are there when it comes to results-based monitoring and evaluation. So I'm very, very delighted to be able to go through this. And let me just be able to share my screen so we can be able to begin this. So I'm also happy that we have participation from all over the world. I think we have been able to see people indicating from which locations they are connecting from. I think please feel free. I think if you are not indicated where you're connecting from, at the chat section there, please indicate. And I'm sure Esther and Milka will be able to appreciate your participation. So let me just be able to share this with you. Okay, good. So this is basically what we want to demystify today. That is frameworks that are basically used in results-based monitoring and evaluation. And one of the critical things that we want to start by demystifying is basically just trying to look at the concept of the framework. We want to be able to make sure that we have a very good understanding of this concept regarding the framework. And again, we will also be able to look at, because every framework will always be able to indicate some of the results that we are expecting to be able to see in an intervention. So what are the relationships that are normally there between input, activity, outputs, outcomes, and impacts? And so we will be able to just give some good definitions, because sometimes in our consultancy work, sometimes we always find M&E professionals not being able to articulate some of those concepts very well. And so we'll be trying to just explain them in a simpler way to make sure that some of these concepts become very, very easy. Again, we'll look at the different types of frameworks that we have in results-based monitoring and evaluation. And we will pick one of those frameworks, which is dominating a lot of discussion currently. That's the theory of change, and look at it as a very, very significant framework to always ensure that you have that for your particular intervention, be it a project, be it a program. And so we'll be able to highlight that. And again, also, we'll be looking at the significance of having a sound monitoring and evaluation framework. So we'll be able to look at that. And once we're able to do that, we will be able to have achieved what we wanted to look for today. Again, after that, as we said, we will also have a participants feedback session, about 30 minutes, just to be able to hear your comments, your questions that we'll be able to respond to, so that we can ensure that we are able to support you very well in this particular area. So let me just be able to begin what we needed to look at today. And first of all, I think it's good just to reiterate the objectives for this particular webinar session. It is good to be able to understand that some of the things that we would want to be able to ensure that we're able to achieve in today's session is, number one, to make sure that we're able to demystify the concept of the framework as used in results-based monitoring and evaluation. Again, also to try and demystify the relationships among inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes and impacts in results-based monitoring and evaluation. Then we will be able also to explain the different types of frameworks that you can be able to use in your results-based monitoring and evaluation. Again, also, as we said earlier on, we'll be able to expound on the theory of change as a very significant framework for results-based monitoring and evaluation. And then lastly, one of the objectives also we will also want to achieve is to make sure that we are able to explain the significance of developing a sound monitoring and evaluation framework in results-based monitoring and evaluation. Now, let's start here. This is where we start. Just going through the concept of results-based framework, and basically just trying to understand the concept of this, and ensuring that we are in a very good, position to make sure that we are able to understand the concept of the framework quite clearly. And yeah, so when you talk about a framework, of course, just from language explanation, is that a framework may be defined as a structure for supporting or enclosing something, basically. I think we always talk about the skeletal framework for biologists. And we know that the skeletal framework in a human body is very, very important, because it's what holds all the organs together. So again, also, from this understanding, I think then we can be able to say that an M&E framework therefore becomes a very, very critical element in your M&E plan for your organization, because it allows us to be able to depict the results and also show us the sequence of steps that will be able to, will be appropriate to be able to achieve those particular results. And so most of the frameworks that we will have in monitoring and evaluation, they will be able to help us really show these are the results that we are expecting from a particular intervention. These are the sequence of steps to be able to achieve those project results, and all of them will do that in different ways. And that's why we'll be looking at the different types of frameworks that we are able to have. And again, also, it is important also to mention that when we talk about frameworks, most of the times they will be presented in the form of models. They will be presented in the form of tables. They will also be presented in the form of pictures or maps. And the whole purpose of this is to make sure that they are able to visualize the factors that are basically driving an intervention. So all the time when we are preparing a framework, to make sure that people can actually visualize what is driving an intervention, then that's why we will be wanting to be able to use either models, tables, pictures, or maps that will be able to help us in terms of being able to see what drives a particular intervention. And again, also, they are very, very helpful in trying to illustrate how a project or program should actually be able to work. they work in a very good way to make sure that they are able to demonstrate this is how a program should ideally be able to work. And then again, also, they should also be reviewed and updated regularly. That is something that we always find because a lot of professionals in the humanitarian and development sector, you will find that they will prepare their frameworks and believe that that framework doesn't need to be reviewed again. And it's always good to emphasize that a lot of things change when you're running a program or a project, and it is always good to make sure that some of those changes are basically reflected and ensuring that our frameworks are updated regularly to be able to present the current reality. Again, also, they are used throughout the program or project cycle. So as much as we might develop them in the initiation or in the planning stage of the project, then the use of them does not end there. We have to make sure that we are regularly using them to make sure that we are able to interpret what is happening in the project based on the frameworks that we were able to prepare. So it's very, very important to make sure that they are used throughout the program and project cycles. Again, also, it is also important to say that the program level framework also is built upon the project level frameworks, because remember, we always define, there's always this confusion in the development and humanitarian space where people use the word program to mean a project. And I think from good practice of project management, we know that a program incorporates basically a collection of similar projects. And it is always good to understand that if you have a program level framework, then it needs to be built up upon the projects that basically comprise that program. And that's why we're saying it will be built upon the project level frameworks that you have. Now, what are some of the critical components that we should always be able to expect in an M&E framework? Now, what you will find in most M&E frameworks, if you pick an M&E framework, you'd expect that, first of all, the M&E framework will definitely be able to have a narrative component, which is a very, very critical. And it is always good to make sure that we are able to look at that. And it is good to ensure that we actually ensure that we are able to describe we're able to have a narrative component that basically describes the framework that is actually being used. So depending on the different types of frameworks that you're working with, it will basically be able to describe what the framework would definitely be. And then again, also, it's also good to have the part for the results, which is the results framework. But basically, when I pick a framework, I would expect that in one way or the other, I will be able to understand what are the results of this project, what are the results of this program, and that should actually be able to come out very, very clearly. So some of those things therefore become quite useful components to make sure that we are able to have the results framework, the results actually depicted very well in a particular framework. Then again, of course, most frameworks will also be able to have the planning matrices. That is, it will try to show us these are the strategic steps for the monitoring and evaluation activities to be able to achieve the results of the project or program. One of the very good frameworks for that is the results framework. It tries to demonstrate that very well, that this is your planned understanding of how you will be able to achieve some of these results that you have anticipated to be able to have. So that's why we're saying also it's important to note that a well thought out monitoring and evaluation framework will always be able to assist very greatly with thinking through the project or program strategies, objectives, planned activities, and actually will also be very, very helpful in helping us understand the most appropriate ones that we should actually be able to implement. So it therefore becomes very, very important to make sure that we can actually be able to utilize the monitoring and evaluation framework. Now, there is also a challenge here whereby you find some people will try to, will always try to equate the monitoring and evaluation framework together with the monitoring and evaluation plan. But here from standard monitoring and evaluation practice, there's a difference. And a lot of people talk about the two as similar. So you will see someone talking about the framework, and they say that they still mean a monitoring and evaluation plan. And I think it's because one is a subset of the other. And I think probably that's why there's that confusion a lot of the times. And maybe I may just want to be able to hear from one of us who probably be able to maybe just share their mind on what they think the difference is, just basically hear from one of us. If you indeed believe there is a difference, or if indeed you believe there is no difference, I think it's good to hear that. So if you want to share a thought, probably can you be able to raise your hand in the Zoom? Maybe I will give you an opportunity to be able to share your thoughts on that, because as we're saying, it's an interactive session, so we may want at some point just to be able to hear your contributions and now and then. So somebody who wants to be able to share, I think if you raise your hand in Zoom, I should be able to see. If you're able to raise your hand in Zoom, I should be able to see just your thoughts. I think we are not looking for the right answer or for the wrong answer. We just want to hear what are your thoughts regarding whether there's a difference between monitoring and evaluation framework. So let's hear from Demystifying. Demystifying, you want to share your thoughts? I can give you an opportunity. Demystifying, you can unmute. And I'm sure we will be able to hear you.
Realize I wasn't muted. So like you stated, a framework is like a structure that would tell you, okay, this needs to be there in your plan. But when you get to the M&E plan, it will give you the details. Like we know, okay, under the framework, we're supposed to collect data from these sources, but then when we get to the M&E plan, it will give you the details of how that collection will be done. Yes, you know the sources, but how are you actually going to do it? So I think that's one component that differentiates an M&E framework and an M&E plan from an M&E plan. Thank you. I submit.
Okay, thank you, Demystifying. I think we got you quite clearly, and I think that's quite agreeable that the M&E plan will be more detailed in terms of what will eventually be done to make sure that if we want to achieve the specific results, we're able to achieve them. Because when you just look at the framework, as we said earlier on, this is just a visual diagram that tries to summarize what will be the causal sequence, or what will be the expected results that we would want to be able to see. And that is one of the things that we are able to clearly differentiate. That is between the M&E framework and the M&E plan. And that is why, as we always say, they can't mean the same. So, so most of the times in our work in training and also in consultancy, we are always finding that challenge whereby a lot of practitioners would want to associate this as the same. And it is always good to make sure that we're able to understand that they are eventually different from one another, and it therefore becomes quite critical to make sure that we are able to ensure that we understand the differences between the two. Now, the other thing that would be critical maybe is just to just highlight to you the differences. As you can see, an M&E framework is therefore a table that will be able to list maybe all your indicators of the program, including the data sources, the baseline, the target, and how often it will be measured and who will be responsible for measuring it. Whereas if you go to the M&E plan, is a document that basically describes the entire M&E system for the project or program or for the organization, including who will be responsible, what forms and tools will be used, how will the data flow through the organization, and how who will be able to make decisions using the data that is collected. And so therefore, it is therefore noteworthy to know that the M&E framework is actually a component part of the M&E plan. So when you're presenting your M&E plan, then you will be able to have a component that is basically titled as the M&E framework. And that is how they actually associate with one another. So, so it's always good to make sure that you are able to understand that, whereby you understand that when we are listing out the components of the M&E plan, then we will list the M&E framework as a component of the M&E plan, but the M&E plan is actually the document that basically tries to describe, like today, if you go and get an M&E plan for a particular project or program, then you will be able to understand what is the plan for the M&E for that particular program or project. And a framework will just be a component of it, because a framework, as we say, is just a tabular representation of the project results that would indicate maybe the indicators, the data sources, the baseline, the target, what will be measured, particularly if it's a results framework. And then again, also the other types of frameworks that we have. So it's just a very, it's a tabular presentation, as we said earlier on, whereas the M&E plan is basically a document. One of these days, we will also be able to have a webinar on the M&E plan. So I'll be looking forward that we'll be able to log in that as we clarify how to go about putting up an M&E plan for the project, program, or for the organization for that matter. So it's always good to understand that difference clearly. And it is something that will be very critical to make sure that we're able to understand. Now, another thing, in the midst of talking about frameworks, you can talk about frameworks if you are not clear about the inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts, because they have relationships that they're able to relate together. And it is always good to make sure that we're able to understand what are the relationships between the inputs, the activities, the outputs, the outcomes, and also the impacts. And it is always very important to make sure that we're able to understand that quite clearly. So when anytime we're talking about the inputs, of course, in an intervention, if you don't have inputs, then you do not expect to be able to undertake any activities. So we always start from inputs. That is, some resources are invested in a project intervention or in a program intervention. And these could be able to include things like technical assistance, computers, mosquito nets, training, different kinds of inputs that are basically supported by the donor funds. And we'll be able to put those inputs. And once we have the inputs, then the other thing that we will definitely be able to have is simply to be able to have the processes and the activities, or rather what we call activities. And in certain instances, you might find people talking about the processes that they're able to utilize. And when you talk about the activities or the tasks or the processes, we are talking about basically the tasks that will actually be carried out to be able to achieve the project or program objectives. And it's very, very important to make sure that we are able to understand that. Is normally quite critical to make sure that we're able to understand that progression from inputs to activities. And then normally when we come from activities, of course, we anticipate to get the outputs. And this is what we normally refer to as immediate results. Now, what you find is that most practitioners, when they are trying to articulate the different results levels, sometimes you find someone putting down an outcome at the output level. And most of the times you will find the challenge with that is because they first of all don't understand what do we mean when you talk about an output. What is an output? They don't understand what is an outcome, and that's why we are trying to clarify this. Now, you should understand from your activities, once your activities are implemented, what are the immediate results that you will be able to achieve from the project or program after or immediately after your activities are executed. And that is what we normally refer to as outputs. It is always good to make sure that we're able to understand what are the outputs as those immediate results that will be achieved at the project or program level through the execution of activities, just to make sure that we are able to understand what exactly we are able to do. And then again, also we have outcomes. And outcomes is simply a set of short-term or immediate results at the population level that is normally achieved by the project or program through the execution of activities. And that really becomes quite critical to be able to ensure that you're able to achieve your outcomes. And as you can see, these are not the immediate results. These are basically the results that are a progression from the immediate results. And that's why we always say they are intermediate or they are short-term at the population level. And they will all normally also be achieved after the activities are executed, but they are not immediate. They are basically intermediate or short-term. And it is always good to be able to know how to be able to articulate them. And then again, also we have the impacts. And whenever you're looking at the impacts, you're talking about what are some of these long-term effects or end results of the project or program that will come as a result of the achievement of the outcomes. And normally these ones are normally at the higher level. And most of the times you always say, when these ones are achieved, then we can say we have actually been able to achieve the goal or the goals of the project once this has actually been achieved. Now, you find that in basic practices, most of the times, even when we are conducting evaluations, because of the stages in which evaluation, where evaluation studies come in, we can only be able to track outcomes and outputs. We are not able to track impacts, and that's why normally whenever we want to be able to track the impacts, we will always be able to commission an impact study, and which most of the times in most interventions, this will be normally be done maybe 3 to 5 years after an intervention, just to make sure that we are able to assess those long-term effects or long-term results that will be able to come from the project or program as expected. So, so it's very, very good to be able to understand that. Now, we have an example here, just to make sure that we're able to understand this very, very well. We have an example here, and we'll try to use an example, one for a road construction project, and here for a school program, and also another one for a health project. And from this, we will try to see the linear relationship. Like for instance, when you're looking at the inputs, of course, these ones will be similar in most projects. That is, you need some donor money, you need some facilities, you need some equipment, you need some supplies, you need some human resources or staff, technical expertise. But now when it comes to activity, like when you take an example for an activity for a particular project, which was to construct a road, then the immediate result, which is the output that you can get once a road is constructed, is that a road is actually constructed. And the intermediate result, or the short-term result, which is the outcome, will be that by construction of the road, then access to the market will actually be increased, or more products will actually be sold as expected. And this will consequently lead to the longer term result, which is basically having an improvement in household income, because now people have access to the market, they are able to sell more products. And as a result, you find that at the population level, there is improvement in household income as expected. And if we take again a different example, if we take this example of an activity where we were teaching secondary school students with enhanced teaching methods and textbooks, one of the things that you will realize is that, of course, the students will complete their courses. And then after they are able to complete their courses, we will be able to realize that the students are able to advance to the university. They are able to gain and use the knowledge that they are able to acquire. And what this will eventually lead to is that there will be improved labor force and income as much as possible. And this is an objective for most governments. They will always try to engage in this kind of interventions. Again, particularly in World Bank funded projects, just trying to make sure that they can improve labor force and income. And those are some of the, that is another good example just to show you the progression as much as possible. And again, also, if you look at the example of a health center that is providing immunizations, you realize that at the immediate level, you will have the babies receiving immunizations. So you'll be talking about the number of children that were able to get the immunization. And then again, also, you will also find the immediate outcome that you have babies that are less susceptible to diseases and illnesses. And so you'll be tracking some of those statistics to make sure that you're able to realize that at the outcome level. And what this does in the long run is that there is decreased incidence of disease, and also the infant child mortality will also be achieved together with the improved health as expected. And this is something that we'll be able to see as much as possible. Now, so Christine, I can see what you're saying, that it is important to look at the changes of incidences of the diseases as an outcome. But then again, you realize that when it comes to particularly health interventions, to observe this decreased incidence is not something that will automatically be able to happen at the outcome level. So what we might be able to see is that we will note less susceptibility to diseases and illnesses. But then again, now when we monitor this at the impact level, then we will be able to see that incidences of diseases, that is the infection rates will actually be less. And that is why we are putting that at the impact level. So when you look at this, this basically just tries to show you the progression. It's a very logical progression that you can always be able to use, and you can always be able to understand just that you don't need to be able to struggle so much with trying to look at the relationships between your different results levels. And that is why it is very, very important for us to make sure that we are able to understand that as much as possible. Now, the other thing that would be important is that I know you will come across different donor organizations or different INGOs that will use different terms. But you need to understand that the 4 results levels don't so much change. So you will always be able to have a specific activity or an intervention, a tangible change or intangible change, an intermediate change, and the ultimate change. But different donors, different organizations can use different terminologies. And it is important to know that if you're working with European Union, you might find them using overall objective, project purpose, specific objective, expected results, and activities and inputs. But then again, if you work with some donors like World Bank, you'll be able to see that they might use the standard terms that we have just used in a short while. So don't let the terminologies confuse you, but basically the 4 main results levels still remain intact, but the terms used could be different. So the best thing is to make sure that you're able to understand the terms that your donor basically uses, or the term that your organization uses, and basically just pursue that relationship as we have seen it. So it's very, very important to be able to look at that. Now, again, also, the other critical thing to be able to look at is what are the different types of frameworks that are used in results-based monitoring and evaluation. And I think I'll be spending a little bit more time just trying to define this, ensuring that we're able to understand what are the different typologies of frameworks that are there that people will use in results-based monitoring and evaluation. And I think I may want to hear your thoughts, maybe some of the frameworks that the types that you are regularly using in your monitoring and evaluation processes, and just mention a few of them. So somebody who wants to mention one, you can just raise your hand. We'll be able to see that, and you can be able to mention one of the types that you're able to use at different times. I'm trying to check somebody here who has raised their hand. Okay, yeah, I can see D Meander there talking about the logical framework. Yes, of course, we have the logical framework, which really becomes quite useful, very, very much. I don't think there is any project or program intervention that will be there without the logical framework. So that's quite appropriate, and it's good to be able to hear that. Again, also Beverly Chinyama is also talking about the theory of change. And I think we have an idea of the typologies that are there that we can always be able to find when we are talking about the frameworks that are normally used in results-based monitoring and evaluation. Now, the first category that we might want to be able to outlay, and this is something that sometimes a lot of people normally don't conceptualize it as a framework, but is one of the categories that we have for frameworks, is what we refer to as conceptual frameworks, as well as the theory of change frameworks. We will be getting into some details about the theory of change as a significant framework and why it's really dominating a lot of our discussions nowadays, as becoming critical in terms of how we are able to utilize it. And so we have the conceptual or the theory of change framework. And then the other one that we will always be able to have is the results framework. And I don't think there is anybody in monitoring and evaluation that will not rely on this as much as possible, because this really becomes a very good framework to be able to have so that we can be able to monitor and evaluate what will be happening in the project. And then thirdly, we have the logical framework, as it was actually mentioned, and it is also very useful to be able to have the logical framework. Now, it is good to know that as much as we have the three types, we will need to be able to use all of them at different times. And that is why we are talking about the development progression of the different types of frameworks, whereby we start with the theory of change, then again we go to the results framework, and then again we go to the logical framework, making sure that we are able to get this clearly defined, so that our project can actually be looked into. And so we will definitely be able to have this progression for the different types of the frameworks as we were able to indicate. So we have the theory of change, we have the results framework, then we have the logical framework that we are able to have. So let's start by looking at the conceptual framework, which I think could be a little bit new to majority of us. But the conceptual framework simply is just a simple diagram that tries to illustrate the causal linkages between the components of a project or a program and the outcomes of interest that we need to be able to have. So basically, it tries to just depict what are the linkages between certain components of the project or program, and looking at the outcomes of interest that will come out of it. And it is normally useful in terms of identifying and also being able to illustrate the factors and the relationships that influence the outcome of a project or program intervention, and trying to look at what are some of those factors that will affect the intervention that we are working in. And by identifying these variables that factor into the project performance and depicting ways that they will be able to interact, then the results can reasonably be expected from the program activities as outlined. And a good example is basically like what you are seeing there, whereby this is just a program that basically tries to look at, in addition to what other donors are supplying on health services, in order to increase service utilization with the ultimate outcome of improved health. So it's trying to show you what are the parties that will actually be involved. So it's giving just the program conceptualization, trying to show what are the components that will be critical, what will be the key aspects that will be able to happen, to ensure that health services are utilized, which eventually leads to improved health practices, and again, which eventually will be able to lead to a healthy outcome. So just an example of that, and we will be able to see that quite clearly. Now, the other example that I may want to also share with you is this one. And for some of us who work on food system and nutrition projects or programs, you may have come across this USAID conceptual framework for food and nutrition security. And this is basically a conceptual framework of how to be able to implement an intervention in food and nutrition security. And you can actually be able to see the interlink that is between the investment levers, the food system, supply and demand, the drivers that affect the intervention, and also what are some of the development outcomes that we actually want to be able to see within that context of resilience as indicated there. So basically it helps planners, programmers just to be able to design the intervention in such a way they will be able to take care of these drivers, these supply and demand of food systems, the investment levels that they need to consider to make sure that they are able to achieve the development outcomes as indicated. So basically that's what a conceptual framework does. Now, the second part of it on the conceptual framework, let's look at the theory of change, because it's a good example of also a conceptual framework. And basically, it has become quite relevant to be able to work with the theory of change. And basically, the theory of change will basically be a narrative that visually describes the underlying logic of the results chain, that is why and how the achievement of one level of results contributes to the achievement of the next level of results, becoming very critical. And we need to be able to understand that that it's a very important framework as well, that actually really helps in ensuring that we're able to understand that. And this underlying logic of results chain is what we'll be able to demonstrate here. That is how your inputs lead to activities, how your activities lead to outputs, how your outputs lead to outcome, and how your outcomes also lead to impact. And that really becomes important. And again, also, it goes a little bit further in mentioning what are some of the risks and assumptions or preconditions that we will also need to consider so that the intended changes are basically realized. Now, let me just take you back a little bit in just trying to define this concept of the theory of change so that you can understand where it comes from, so that you can understand why it is important to consider this as a significant framework that you should always be able to have. And again, also, it is also, it will also be critical to make sure that we are able to understand that. And one of the critical things that we need to understand about the background of the theory of change is that when you look at change that you want to be able to have in a particular context or in a particular community, is that you will realize that that change, for it to be able to happen or to be able to emerge, it is always as a result of simultaneous push and pull of multiple political, cultural, and social factors, and even economic factors that will come to play to make sure that that change is actually able to emerge, or that change is actually able to happen. And it is therefore why it is always important to be able to understand what are these influencing political factors, cultural factors, social factors that would actually make our intervention not to be able to bring us to the change that we actually desire for the project. And that is why now the theory of change has actually emerged as a very good framework for being able to come up with the ideas or your hypothesis or theories that the organization or the project or program will be able to formulate regarding how change will be able to happen. So it therefore becomes quite critical to be able to look at that. And some of these theories, therefore, can actually be conscious or unconscious. They could be based on personal beliefs, assumptions, and or personal perception of reality. And that is why we always say, sometimes that's why we call it a theory, because it can turn out not to be true because maybe it was just a personal perception of reality. And but then it actually becomes very useful as a guiding framework for all stages of thinking, action, and sense making when we are running the intervention for social change processes. So it therefore becomes paramount that we are able to use a theory of change, and it therefore becomes a very critical component. Again, also, it is not static, it is not cast in stone. It is something that we expect that is an ongoing process of reflection. Yes, there is the reflection that we do at the beginning to be able to visualize the theory of change. But then again, it should always culminate an ongoing process of reflection to make sure whether the theory of change is still relevant. And that's why you will find even in most evaluation studies that we will do, we are always also having an objective to see whether we can prove whether the theory of change was actually realized. So it becomes important to be able to look at it. And that's why organizations must be able to work with the theory of change as an appropriate approach to guide their strategic thinking and action, as well as their collaborative action with others. Because as you can understand, there is a lot of influences for change to be able to happen. And so we need to be able to consider that. And that is why we say the theory of change, therefore, is an approach. And when we call it an approach, we're saying it's a thinking and an action approach to help us navigate the complexity of social change. And apart from that also, we can also be able to consider it as a process whereby the inquiry is therefore an ongoing process of analysis and reflection, whereby it's not a one-off exercise and you run with it, but it will always require an ongoing action learning cycle where we act, we learn, then we act again. So it's very important to be able to understand that. And then, of course, as much as it's an approach, is a process, is also a product, whereby that at the end of this analysis and reflection, we need to be able to see the TOC as a product, whereby you will be able to present it in a narrative or a visual form that we can actually be able to see it and appreciate it. And that is why most of the times when dealing with different project or program interventions, we will always engage in this kind of a process whereby we start by clarifying the purpose of the theory of change process. Then we describe the desired change as we analyze the current situation to understand what are some of the political, social, economic factors that could affect the desired change, identify the critical domains of change, identify also the strategic priorities so that we're able to map the change pathways. And this will also be able to help us to define the monitoring and evaluation learning priorities and processes, as well as ensure that we're able to use and adapt the theory of change to the changing circumstances as we go along. So we and this becomes like a cyclical process that we have to continuously engage in. Now, in terms of examples for theory of change, I think there are numerous. It will always depend on what the intended user wants to be able to achieve. This is just just a picture snapshot If you go to Google and you're trying to get the different theories of change that are available, then you find some people would want to express it in this kind of a way. Some other people want to express it in this kind of way. And so it will have multiple dimensions of how different people will be able to express it. But there's one that I've come across that really comes out clearly in the sense that it is actually able to map the pathway of change very clearly. Now, look at this. We are beginning at the point of inputs here, where we are looking at, we need to invest in relationships, we need to invest in human capital, financial resources, and as a result, we are making some assumptions about where we are starting from. And these inputs, therefore, lead us to our key cross-cutting themes that we are emphasizing in the intervention, that is adaptive learning, gender equity, sustained engagements, and some of those activities under those themes will help us to achieve some outputs. And some of those outputs will be the campaigns and collaboration hubs, the incubators and training and feedback mechanism, multi-stakeholder initiatives and policy change, which would definitely be able to give us some intermediate outcomes where there is increase in knowledge and skills, communities for change, and then this will progressively lead us to longer-term outcomes where we will have active and engaged citizens, as well as responsible leaders, which will definitely lead to the impact this intervention was looking into, which was more inclusive and accountable societies. But every time we are articulating the theory of change, we will always start by looking at the inputs that we have, and also defining the assumptions and the preconditions that we need to be able to have in place to make sure that we can easily map the pathway to change. So when you look at this kind of a theory of change, in your mind, you are able to formulate exactly how the project intervention or the program intervention will be able to flow. And I like the fact that they are able to clearly map the pathway of change very clearly from the beginning, from the inputs all the way to get to the impact as expected. So, these are some of the things that really become important to be able to look at. Now, the other thing is also looking at this other example here, where we are able to see. Now, this one is a bit mixed up, but again, it's just a different way of presenting it, whereby when we are able to have all these, domains of change and the preconditions that are necessary to be able to have, then we will be able to see that being able to use chlorination procedures, water points established, wash volunteers trained, a hand washing campaign in place, this will ultimately lead to the outputs that we are seeing there. And then the two outputs will lead to the one outcome there, where there is decreased incidence of waterborne diseases among IDPs, which will eventually lead to improved livelihoods of internally displaced persons in the Delta River region. So that's another example, just to be able to show you depict the change. Now, much said about the theory of change. I think it is also good to mention a few things also about the results framework, which is, as I said earlier on, this is a commonly used framework, very widely used in a lot of interventions. And a results framework is good in giving us the causal sequence of how you will achieve your desired project results, beginning with inputs, moving through to activities, and also moving through to outputs, and as well culminating in outcomes and impacts as expected. And now this diagram is therefore able to show the direct causal relationships between the incremental results of the project activities all the way up to the goal or impact of the intervention as expected. And again, also the project logic will always be able to explain how the project results are to be achieved, including the causal relationships and the underlying assumptions that we are able to have. And this one is regularly used because it's a very, very critical component of what we call results-based management, whereby we say that we want to manage our interventions in such a way that we are able to focus on the results. That is a management strategy that focuses on performance and achievement of outputs, outcomes, and impacts as expected. And so this one of the reasons why it's widely used is because it is actually able to focus on the performance and the achievement of the outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And a good example is like what we are seeing here, where you will start by, first of all, describing your results at the end here. And after that, you will be able to put your indicators with your definitions as needed. And as much as you tell us about the indicators, you will also need to tell us what will be the method of data collection for that particular indicator. And of course, you're able to list there whether it's a questionnaire, whether it's a focus group, what will be the timing and frequency of collecting that data, whether it's annual, monthly, quarterly, or weekly. That will be important to understand. And then again, we need to also be able to know who will be responsible for collecting that data. Is it the mill team leader? Is it the mill team staff or consultant? We need to be able to understand who exactly. And then who do you target to collect this data from? In other words, who will be your respondents? And then again, what are the means of analysis that you're going to be able to use, the types of analysis that you need to be able to perform. And we know that when it comes to data analysis, we will likely either be doing quantitative data analysis or qualitative data analysis, depending on the source of the data. And then again, also, do you need to be able to subgroup your data or stratify your data into female and male-headed households, or large households and small households, or that is gender or the type of households that you will be able to have in your intervention, or you do not need any subgrouping. And then eventually show us that once this information is collected and analyzed, who will be able to use that information for communication and decision making. So it's important that it actually ends at that level. So there's a very, very clear progression on terms of what are the results, how will the data be collected, who will collect, how will it be analyzed, to how that information is going to be used in the project or program intervention becomes important. And I think I have another second example for you here. This is a bit different from the other one because it goes ahead beyond indicating the indicator. It also indicates the definition, the baseline, the target, and this also becomes quite important to be able to break down the results up with this level of details. But the data sources remain: the frequency of data collection, who will be responsible, and what will be the reporting or the use of that information. It is able also to clearly indicate there. Now, again, the last one is the logical framework. And this is a framework that has been used since time immemorial. And I think people are so much aware about this, more than the results framework and the theory of change and conceptual frameworks. And it is important to know that why it has been widely adopted is that it started being used in the 1960s. And it was developed as a result of poor planning and monitoring of development projects. And it is a tool of choice for many agencies and donor communities. And it becomes a very powerful and a useful technique that would need also more use than just in international development and humanitarian sector only. And again, the other thing that it is important to note here is that sometimes people normally confuse between the logical framework and the logical framework approach. And sometimes it's always good to make sure that we are able to clarify that quite clearly. Because when you talk about the logical framework, we are either talking about the log frame or the logic model. And the log frame or the logical framework will normally be the matrix document, while the logical framework approach is the methodology or the approach or the process of getting the logical framework or the log frame. So that's normally the difference, because sometimes you will see some people talking about the LFA as like it's similar to the LF. But it's important to know that there is a difference between those two. So the logical framework approach is therefore a process that ends with the log frame as the product. And that is why the process of coming up with the logical framework basically has just some 5 steps, where you do some situational analysis, then you do your stakeholder analysis, problem analysis, objective analysis, and it basically completes with the alternative analysis that basically allows you to document the LFA. And I know most of you may have heard about the problem tree, the objective tree, the alternative tree, and this is where it comes out. It comes from the LFA process. And that is what gives us that as we try to get the logical framework into place. And so we can say that the LFA therefore gives us the product, which is the logical, which is the log frame, which is a 4x4 matrix as we have always known it. You might find the narrative summary presented in different terminologies or terms, because as we said earlier on, some donors will call it goal, some others will call it impact, outcomes, outputs. But of course, there will be the verifiable indicators, the means of verification, and also the important assumptions that we actually need to be able to understand from this. And I think it is always good to make sure that we are able to understand the logical framework. So earlier on, we were able to look at the relationship between the different results levels, but you realize that the logical framework therefore tries to identify and communicate these logical relationships in a project by basically tracking the vertical and the horizontal reasoning, something we call the vertical logic and the horizontal logic, which really becomes important. And this is what allows us to know that the logic that we have in the framework will lead us to the achievement of the project's ultimate goal. And so that's why we always say that if the vertical logic is sound, but horizontal logic remains, then the project will actually be able to achieve its outcomes as expected. But then again, you'll find there are different versions of the logical frameworks. Of course, organizations are at free will on how to design their logical frameworks, and you might find that your organizations probably will have it very important to basically be able to have some of these logical frameworks put quite clearly. And I think the most important thing is to make sure that you can actually be able to understand the structure that your organization uses, but it will have some of these critical elements that we have been able to mention about a logical framework as expected. And of course, definitely it will have these different results levels, as we mentioned earlier. I think I defined this for you earlier on. And it is important for us to make sure that we are able to showcase that. And some of the things that we need to be able to have in place is just to be able to see probably an example. Like for this one was a project that was looking at improving the quality of river water in Delta River. Definitely coming from some of these activities below here, progressing to the outputs, progressing them to the outcomes, then to the ultimate impact or goal. And the respective indicators are clearly defined. And one of these days, we will also have a session on the indicators, just to go more into the details of monitoring and evaluation indicators. So make sure you are always subscribed to our social media handles so that you can get to know when we are doing the next webinar, and make sure that you are actually well informed about when we have that session, just to take a deep dive into indicators as expected, another challenge area for most practitioners. Then again, from here, you are able to see that we are able to have what are some of the data sources that we are going to be able to have. And that really becomes important to make sure that we're able to have the means of verification. We are also able to have the assumptions and risks that we need to be able to understand. And you'll be able to look into the deeper details of this good example of a log frame that will be shared to you when we send the notes as expected. Now let's look at the last part that we were supposed to look at after the different areas of frameworks that we have looked at. It was also good to be able to look at the significance of a sound monitoring and evaluation framework as quite critical. So one is that you will understand that without a framework, then it will become very hard to understand and analyze a project or program, as we have seen. So you cannot be able to have an intervention, and you are not able to use some of these frameworks that we have mentioned, because it enhances your understanding, it enhances your analysis of the project or program as expected. And then the other thing is also that it will also help to increase the understanding of the project or program goals and results. And that also becomes quite critical to be able to look at. And then again, also they also help to delineate the internal and external elements that could affect the project or program success, so that you're able to relate with the external and internal components that are expected to hinder the project success. And then again, also they constitute the agreed upon project or program results by the key stakeholders that will be undertaking the project or program successfully. Most of the times, even when we come in as evaluators, because we also evaluate projects on behalf of organizations, one of the things to basically understand what the key stakeholders agreed as the results of the project or program is to ask for the frameworks that they were actually using. And sad to say that in some situations you find that there are no frameworks that there are no frameworks to be able to use, and sometimes therefore it becomes a big challenge to be able to have some of those frameworks in place. And then again, also, it is important to make sure that we are able to develop sound monitoring and evaluation plans. Subsequent implementation of monitoring and evaluation activities become important. And again, also ensuring that we are able to articulate clear project or program goals, and also ensure that we have measurable short and medium and long-term results are clearly defined. Again, also, we have seen it is able to articulate the relationships between the inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts, like we saw in the theory of change, where it was able to give us the pathway for change. And again, also, it also able to demonstrate how the activities will lead to the desired outcomes and impacts, especially when the resources are not available to conduct rigorous impact evaluations. They are able to display the relationships graphically as expected. So it is important to be able to have that. So sorry for that. And then the other thing is that we need to be able to understand, what are some of the, critical things that we also need to be able to foresee the difficulties that will be there when we are trying to formulate the M&E frameworks. Of course, there will be some difficulties, like for instance, when you're trying to choose indicators that will truly measure project results. And for most of us who have worked with indicators, you know that sometimes it's very, very hard to get appropriate indicators to measure some results. And sometimes these are challenges, particularly like as you've seen in the results framework, we have to be able to showcase the indicators clearly. Again, also on the logical framework. So some of the challenges M&E practitioners will come across is in being able to articulate the details as well. And again, also, the other thing is also mixing the key elements, such as the project results and activities, being able to define the project activities in project design that may not be logically lead to the desired results. That is also a challenge that we're able to find, whereby the results are not able to logically lead to one another. And we were trying to address that by ensuring that we have a very good fundamental understanding of the different results levels and the different terminologies that different donors use, so that that can really become very clear when we are formulating our frameworks as expected. So it's important to pay attention to that as much as possible. And then again, when you're doing a framework, it is also good to subscribe to some standards. It is also good to make sure that we have some good standards in place. And that is why we are saying that whenever you are developing the M&E framework, we should strive to hold certain key standards, which will include the issue of utility. That is, it can serve practical information needs of the intended users. That is, it can be utilizable, it can be feasible, it's realistic, it's prudent, it's economical, it's simple, can be understood easily. It has propriety, that is, it is conducted legally, ethically, and with regard to those involved and affected by the project activities or the monitoring and evaluation activities. And then again, also it should be accurate. That is, it should be able to reveal and convey technical and accurate information on the indicators. So when you develop your frameworks, try to look at these standards and ask yourself, this framework that we have developed, is it easy to utilize? Is it feasible? Is it simple? Is it proprietary? Is it proprietable? Is it also accurate? And it becomes important to be able to look at that. So we have simply just talked about the three frameworks, where we have looked at the conceptual framework, we have looked at the results framework, and we have also looked at the logical framework or the logic model. And we have said that what basically each of them do, and also the basis of monitoring and evaluation. And so when you look at conceptual framework, most of the time, they will not give us the basis for monitoring and evaluation, but they will help explain the results. But the results and the logical framework are very good as a very good basis for monitoring and evaluating the project as expected. So, it is important to make sure that we are able to look at that. So I think that's where we come to the end of the presentation. And I think as we looked at it, we were saying at least try to finish up. I think I'm 10 minutes into the time that was allocated. But let us introduce a moment of feedback session at this time so that we will be able to hear some of your comments, some of your questions so that I can be able to address them before I hand over back to Pauline. So let me open that forum to make sure that that we are able to get some of your feedback. And of course, as we said, I think Esther has been able to share with you the links for our social media handles. So I'm sure you will be able to get notified of some of the sessions that we'll be having coming up front. And of course, our contacts as well, if you need more information from our end or any of our services, as we briefed you earlier, it would be good to be able to have that. But let's first of all be able to pick a few questions, a few comments. So I think you can be able to raise your hand. I will be able to see your hand raised and give you an opportunity to make your comment or, and ask your question so that we can be able to respond to it. And quite a number of people here wanting to share some comments and questions. And let me start with Mariao Joao. Excuse me if I'm not mentioning your name correctly. You will give me the correct pronunciation.
Hello,
as
morning.
you tell us you're connecting from which country, and as you ask your question or comment.
At this moment, I am in South Africa doing a monitoring and evaluation master. And I would like to have, I do have a curiosity or a question, because try to explain me where you can put, in which of these explanation you can input the theories that will be used in the program. Because usually when I do the evaluation, I do have several problems to find what is the theory that this program is addressing. And I would like, where should we input? Thank you.
Wonderful. And I think that's a very, very good question. And I understand from where you're coming from, because as an evaluator, you'll be faced with that challenge. And, you know, trying to ask yourself now, where do I, get the theories for the intervention. And most of the times you will find that in most interventions, people don't go through this process of definition of what was the theory of change. And this is where the challenge will always come. And sometimes it becomes therefore very, very difficult to be able to consider what were the theories of change for a particular intervention, because they didn't even actually define that. And I think if you were to formulate that late into the final evaluation, you will be doing a great disservice, because really there is a lot that has actually happened in the context, and you may not be able to prove whether the theory of change was actually workable. And I think what I would advise is that if the theory of change was not defined, I think at the point of the final evaluation, I think you may not be able to articulate it, because this is something that was supposed to guide the action of the intervention. And if this was not defined at the planning stages, then you might not really have to struggle to be able to look at it. But then again, I think maybe just to help you in terms of understanding how the intervention was actually was actually implemented, I think what you can relate to and what maybe you can mention in your evaluation is the conceptual framework for similar interventions, whereby you can go. I think USAID is very good at coming up with conceptual interventions. And I think that is where you can actually be able to get a conceptual framework that has been tried, has been tested in multiple interventions, and you can try to relate to your current intervention. But if the project or program didn't come up with a theory of change, I think there's very little that you can do at that point. So the only thing you can rely is maybe the conceptual frameworks that are available, are done by the very good actors in project management, formulation of interventions. So I think that's what I can be able to advise, Maria, and I hope that is able to answer your question clearly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And it's true, really, USAID, they are the best on putting theories and conceptualizing the programs. You know, it's a little bit easier. Okay,
Sure. You'll find a lot of conceptual frameworks developed by them, as well as other actors as well, I would be able to come up with. And thank you so much for your question, Maria. Let me check if we have someone else who wants to make a question or a comment. I think it is also good to share comments of probably how you appreciated the session as well. I think it is also good to hear that. Let me also hear from Christine Nyagaya. You want to, your hand is lifted up.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you, Christine Nyagaya.
Yeah, first of all, just to appreciate the presentation. It was really insightful. And then just a comment on the question raised by Maria. I just want to give a comment based on my experience with projects that did not have a theory of change at the beginning, but you need to conduct an evaluation. So for such projects, usually what you can apply is impact or outcome harvesting, where you map backwards to where you began because you do not have a theory of change to guide your evaluation. So as opposed to following your theory of change that had the impact level indicators that need to guide the evaluation, you map backwards in what we refer to as impact or outcome harvesting. And then just
explain a little bit the question that there is no theory explanation. We don't know if it's they are using theory of development, theory of participation, realist theory, feminism. We don't know what we should look for. Just this is my question. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, then I think that's a good project to apply the impact or outcome harvesting approach to, because you do not know exactly what they were aiming to achieve. So you work backwards to map out what was intended. And then just a comment on the logical framework approach. Not the logical framework, logical framework approach. You mentioned that it's the most widely used, but I beg to be of a varied opinion, because for huge projects, it becomes really difficult to use the logical framework. And most of these projects tend to move towards using results frameworks because it becomes easy to map out the results. And then on my comment earlier on the chat about the disease incidence, I think I'm coming from a point of comparing rather the incidence as the occurrence of the disease on a regular basis that can be monitored on a monthly basis, like how many cases of malaria are positive or how many children have been immunized. And then at the outcome level or the impact level, or rather the impact level, we look at the prevalence of the disease, which is a population-based measure and not a regularly collected information or data, or rather. Yep.
Okay. I get you, Christine, quite clearly. And Christine, I think we may have met in some forum. I think this name is really becoming very familiar. And I'm sure it could be in some of the M&E forums. But as you rightly put, I think just to address the issue of where you don't have a theory of change that was formulated, yes, outcome harvesting is becoming quite useful for that. And of course, we will also be having some sessions on outcome harvesting as we go along, just to make sure that we can clarify some of these critical areas that a lot of practitioners would want to be able to use. And again, also on your comment on the logical frameworks, I think I spoke a lot about it. The wide use is because of every time people are presenting proposals, it has always become a trend to share a logical framework. And that's why you find there is more use of it because people, when they are making proposals, they have to be able to incorporate a logical framework. And then again, when it comes to the monitoring and evaluation activities, then they less go into the results framework. They still want to use the same logical framework. So I was speaking from that perspective, but again, also in consideration of some complex projects, as you said, sometimes you might want to be able to work with the results framework, and I agree on that. And then also on the issue of the health outcome that we were looking at, I must say, I'm not a public health expert. I'm just a monitoring and evaluation consultant, but I think I agree with that. And something that you can always look at as long as it is an outcome that you're trying to look, and you're trying to be able to define the best outcome so that you can differentiate it from the impact, which is the longer term results. So that's quite good. And let's also hear Mohammed. Mohammed also is connected, and I think your hand is raised. So let's hear from Mohammed. Hassan?
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in. I'm Mohammed Abdi from Somalia, and it's really, I appreciate this kind of session was really very beautiful, and I have benefited a lot from it. I only wanted to understand for two comparison that the structure make. Only I wanted to understand a little bit further about MD framework and MD plan, and also I wanted to understand logical framework and logical framework approach. So if you can a little bit further explain for these two, I wanted to understand. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, so Mohammed, I think we were able to explain that in the session, but no worry. I think what we can do is that because one of the critical aspects of our services is that we do a lot of support, and so I don't know if you be comfortable just to put for us an email. Maybe I can come at your level to just explain it in a way that you're able to clearly understand it, so that at least you are able to understand that difference. But the difference is there, clear cut between a framework and a plan. And also, as we explained earlier on, between the logical framework approach and the logical framework, because what we said is that the LFA is the process that you go through to make sure that you can develop your log frame. And that's why I was able to highlight that. But again, I think if it's still a gray area for you, please just drop us an email. I'm sure Milka and Esther have probably shared our email contacts on the chat, and I'm sure you can be able to raise that, and we can see how to clarify that. Again, also, it would also be good if you can also consider to join one of our short courses or some of our online programs, just to get a deep dive into this, because we go much more beyond what we have shared to make sure that is quite clear. But of course, just raise that, and I think we will be able to see how to help you capture that quite clearly. Is that okay, Mohammed?
Yeah, that's okay. I will share. Thank you very much.
Okay, not a problem. Then I think I also need to be alert. I don't know whether there were some questions from the chat. I've not been able to monitor the chat, but I'm sure Esther and Milka have been looking at that. I don't know whether there are certain things that I could have missed from the chat, but I think maybe I will see if I can get that from Esther and Milka, just to see if there is anything that I may have missed that we needed to respond to. I think the things that I've seen here was on regards to the presentation that will be sent. The recording, of course, will also be available on the YouTube page, and I'm sure you will be able to get that so that you can interact with that more. I think that would be good. I'm trying to look at the participant list here just to see whether there is any other question or comment. Again, also, if there is no question, I think also we can also be able to get a comment from you. And I think, yes, as there are quite a number of comments also on the fact that the session was very helpful, and we'll be able to organize more sessions as we go along. And please make sure you follow us on those pages that have been shared to you. Make sure you subscribe, because that's where we will release the information regarding what we are organizing, and some very interesting sessions coming ahead. And I'm sure our webinar coordinator, Milka, will be reaching out to you just to register for some of those sessions that will be coming along. So I don't seem to see any other hand raised, and I think at this point maybe I will just hand over to our academic coordinator, Pauline, just to be able to tell us what's next, and maybe close the session. And thank you so much for listening. Of course, as we said, please let us know if you need the actual presentation. As we said, via email, we will send it to you in case you need to use it, maybe to train your team or to understand the concepts more. But the recording for the webinar will be publicly available. You'll be able to access it and listen to it again. For now, let me just hand over to Pauline in the interest of time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. I think he's done a very good job to really demystify these issues of frameworks in M&E. I think we can appreciate him. I know we usually clap in our classroom meetings when we are appreciating our presenters, but I think we can use our reaction tab at the bottom of our screens, and just, I think there's a tab for clapping. So you can just click that to show that we are clapping and we are happy for what he has presented for us. Thank you very much. And you can also give yourself a pat on the back for staying with us for this time from the beginning up to the end. I'm sure you've all learned a lot, and I really hope that we'll be able to put into practice what we have learned. So our next steps is that we shall be sharing the presentation. So those we said you can request for the presentation via email, but the recording will be on our social media handles. You'll also be able to see what else we have to offer in our social media outlets. So if you want more information on today's topic or any other topic in project management, you're welcome to get in touch with us and we can work out how we can work together. So wishing you all the best. Have a good afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are. We really, really appreciate you making the time to be with us. So thank you very much and have a good time.
Thank you and bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you and bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Who are those?